It was my last delivery of the night, and I was ready to call it quits. The order came in just before midnight, an address I didn't recognize, tucked away on the outskirts of town. My phone's GPS led me down a long, desolate road, lined with trees so thick they blocked out the moonlight. The house appeared suddenly, shrouded in darkness. It looked abandoned. The paint was peeling off the walls, and the windows were covered in grime. I double-checked the address. This was the place all right. But who would be ordering food this late from a house that looked like no one had lived there for years? I pulled into the driveway, killing the engine. A sense of unease crept up my spine as I grabbed the bag of food and stepped out of the car. The wind had picked up, making the trees rustle in the darkness. For a second, I thought I saw something move in one of the windows, but when I looked again, it was gone. Get it over with, I muttered to myself, walking toward the front door. The wooden steps creaked under my weight, and I noticed the air smelled damp, like mold and decay. I knocked, waited. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. Maybe they were asleep, or pranking me. Just as I was about to leave, the door creaked open on its own. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I had a job to finish. Hesitating, I stepped inside the threshold, holding the food bag like a shield. The inside of the house was nothing like the outside. It was pristine. Furniture perfectly arranged, no dust, no decay. It looked new, but it was dead silent, not a single sound except for my own breathing. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the house. "Your food's here." No response. I was about to drop the bag and leave, when I caught movement from the corner of my eye. Someone was standing at the top of the stairs, barely visible in the shadows. A chill ran through me. I've got your order. You want me to leave it here?" My voice cracked as I forced the words out. The figure didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there, watching me. I took a step back, heart racing, and then I saw it, a pair of eyes in the window next to the stairs. They were wide open, staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Slowly, the figure at the top of the stairs stepped forward, and the dim light from the hallway hit their face. It wasn't human. The face was warped, like something trying to mimic a person but failing. Its eyes were too large, its mouth too small, and those eyes, those cold, unblinking eyes, never left mine. I bolted for the door, dropping the food as I scrambled outside. My car seemed a mile away, and I could feel something behind me, something fast. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and just as I yanked the door open and jumped in, I glanced back at the house. The figure was now standing in the doorway, staring at me. Behind them, I could see more of those eyes, more figures lurking in the shadows. I peeled out of the driveway, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back, not once. As I sped down the road, the GPS rerouted me back to town, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But then, just as I started to calm down, my phone buzzed. A new order, from the same address. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and drove faster. It started like any other night. I was halfway through my shift when I got a delivery to an unfamiliar address on the outskirts of town. The order itself wasn't anything special, just a burger and fries, but when I dropped it off, the guy tipped me $50. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he didn't realize how much cash he'd handed me, but when I tried to return it, he just smiled. "Keep it," he said, his voice low, almost too friendly. I didn't argue. The next night I got another order from the same address. This time, it was a pizza. I was curious, but it wasn't unusual for regulars to order back to back. When I arrived, the same guy answered the door, gave me that same unsettling smile, and handed me $100. That's when things started to feel off. I couldn't help but wonder who tips $100 for a pizza. The house itself was strange too. It sat at the end of a long, winding road, surrounded by trees, and always looked deserted except for him. No lights on inside, no sound, nothing. But he was always there, waiting. Over the next few nights, I kept getting orders from him. Each time the tips got bigger, $50, $100, $200. And each time I went back, the encounters got weirder. The guy's smile never left his face, but his eyes. They were always locked on me, unblinking. One time, I thought I heard someone else in the house. A faint whisper or maybe a laugh. But when I asked, he didn't answer. It wasn't long before I started dreading his orders, but the money was too good to pass up. Rent was coming up, and I needed the cash. Then came the last delivery. I pulled up to the house like usual, but something was different this time. The air felt heavy and thick with tension, and the trees seemed to crowd in on the road, their branches twisting unnaturally toward the house. I could feel something watching me, though I couldn't see what. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. The house was completely dark, with not a single light on. My gut told me to leave, but I knocked again, and the door slowly creaked open. The guy wasn't standing there this time. Instead, there was an envelope on the floor. My name was written on it in neat, elegant handwriting. Inside was $500 in cash, but that wasn't the worst part. Beneath the cash was a small slip of paper with a single sentence scrawled across it. "You're next." I backed away, heart pounding, but as I turned to leave, I felt something cold brush against my neck, like someone standing right behind me. I bolted to my car, the envelope still clutched in my hand, and sped out of there as fast as I could. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew whatever was in that house was still watching, and I haven't taken a delivery since. I had been delivering food for years, and I'd seen my share of strange things, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. It was supposed to be a quick job, just a late-night delivery to a small town I'd never heard of, a few miles off the main road. I punched in the address and followed the GPS through winding back roads until I reached the town of Hollow Ridge. The name alone should have been a warning. The moment I crossed into the town, something felt off. The streets were empty, eerily empty. It was only 10 p.m., but there wasn't a single person outside, not even a stray dog. All the houses were dark, with no lights in the windows, no porch lamps, and no TVs flickering through the curtains. It was like everyone had just vanished. I drove slowly, my headlights cutting through the unnatural stillness. Hollow Ridge wasn't big, just a few blocks of homes, a diner, a gas station, and a church. All of it is fully silent. I checked the order again. 231 Elm Street. When I reached the house, it looked just like the others, dark, lifeless. I parked the car and hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to get the hell out of there. But I couldn't. I had a job to do. The bag of food felt heavier than usual as I stepped out and walked toward the house. The streetlights flickered, casting long, eerie shadows. I knocked on the door, waiting for any sign of life inside. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I was about to leave the bag on the porch when I heard a creak. Slowly the door opened a few inches, just enough for me to see a sliver of someone's face in the darkness. "Your food's here," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the silence. The person didn't respond, just motioned for me to come inside. Against my better judgment, I stepped through the door. The smell hit me first, damp, stale air, like the house hadn't been lived in for years. Yet the customer was standing right in front of me, barely visible in the shadows. "Thanks for the food," they said, their voice hollow, emotionless. "I'll pay you inside." I wouldn't say I liked this. Every alarm in my head was going off, telling me to leave, but I followed them deeper into the house. The further in we went, the colder it got. The walls seemed to close in, and the darkness felt wrong, like it was alive. Finally, we reached the living room, where a single dim light flickered overhead. That's when I saw them. Dozens of people, sitting, standing, staring. Their faces were pale, their eyes empty, and none of them moved. It was like they were frozen in time. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The customer turned to face me fully for the first time, and I saw their eyes. Dark, hollow pits like they weren't really alive. "You're the first visitor we've had in a long time," they said with a twisted smile. "Hollow Ridge hasn't had outsiders in years. Welcome to our town." Suddenly the door behind me slammed shut. I spun around, my heart racing, but there was no way out. The people in the room began to move, slow, jerky motions like they were waking from some terrible sleep. I backed away, but they closed in. "You'll stay with us now," the customer whispered, their cold breath brushing my ear. "Just like the others." I turned and ran, shoving past the frozen figures, my mind screaming for an exit. I could hear their footsteps behind me, getting closer. I reached the door and yanked it open, sprinting toward my car. The town was still empty, still silent, but I knew they were coming. I floored the gas and didn't stop driving until I hit the highway. When I looked in the rearview mirror, Hollow Ridge had disappeared like it had never been there at all. But when I checked my phone, there was a new order from Hollow Ridge.